I'm going to show you how I made this nice serene render in Blender, and at the very start of the recording, I did not like it at all, and I'll show you how I got from, the process actually not going well to this end result that I'm actually quite happy with. And then we're going to cover everything from lighting and some cool tips there and how to manage all that, and texturing, and how I got this face thing in the middle, how I set up the water, and how I built basically everything in the scene. So I'm just going to show you the most important things that happened along the way. The total recording time was 3 hours, but I've cut it down to just the most important parts. And yeah, let's just get into it. Okay, so starting this one off with just a basic blockout to get oriented in this empty void. So it's always nice to start with the general shape of the thing you're trying to make. So I knew this one was going to be a cylindrical type environment. So starting with a cylinder. And I chose 128 subdivisions on that, just so that it's not super steppy, it's more smooth. And then I'm just going in, getting a basic camera angle, 24 millimeters to start. Anywhere around there, kind of zoomed out is where I like to start. And then I'm just doing a checker deselect on this thing. I couldn't get it to line up perfectly for some reason, but I got it close enough to where you can't really tell that it's slightly off. But anyways, that right there, checker deselect. And then I just extruded those little things in there. And then I just added a couple more details from here just to get some basic general detail on the main structure, which is just kind of it's just kind of like the back wall of everything. So as I layer on more detail on top of this, you might not see this directly, but it's just nice to have that kind of detail in there so it kind of can fill in any empty space or awkwardness later on. And it's just a good foundation to build off of. And it's nice to make some stuff like this at the beginning too, where it's just like a basic asset that you don't have to spend too much time on, this pillar I'm making, that you can reuse a bunch of times to build the rest of the bigger environment around it. So I'm just adding some basic extrusions, bevels. Here I just switched the bevel profile to one of the presets, cornice molding, just for really quick, easy, like good and fine preset. And then just throw that on there. A bunch more insets, extrusions, repeat that a bunch of times basically. And then, yeah, I'm just adding, after that, a bevel modifier just to kind of round the corners a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. And then mirror modifier on the Z axis, so I don't have to like model it twice. It's just going to be mirrored vertically. And then there we go. We got like a little pillar that I can use a bunch of times throughout the scene. So this kind of thing is something that you can duplicate a ton of times and it's not going to look bad. It's going to look like good, nice repetition. So it's nice to make one of those and then just reuse it a bunch of times. So with this platform here, same bevel, the cornice molding preset bevel thing in there. And then I'm adding a little cylinder here for, I don't know what you call this, like a little post thing that's going to be in the railing. So I reduced the subdivisions way down to 16 to keep it low poly, and you will not see the minimal polygons at all. So just keep it low so you can reuse it a bunch of times. And then just modeling a little stupid thing here, whatever this is, throwing on a bevel, and then throwing on an array modifier to get that a bunch of times in a row. I probably should have made it a bit taller in retrospect, but whatever. And then yeah, array a bunch of times, duplicate that. And then from here, it's just like some basic trim little square things that I threw on here. Duplicate that around a few times, just a little thing on the bottom, duplicated that, put that up there, duplicated again on the very bottom, and now I have this little platform thing that I can again reuse a bunch of times throughout the scene. So there I'm just duplicating it and then joining all those loose pieces together into one mesh just so it's easy to work with. Taking a texture from Quixel. Quixel is sort of like half sort of working right now still. They're moving all this stuff to like the new fab system, and it's not it's still sort of working in Quixel Bridge, so if you used it before you can kind of use it still. And yeah, this scene looks really different at this stage than it does in the final render, but you'll see kind of how this will transform into that final image that you saw. So there's a lot of things like this texture that I added on the floor that did not make it into the final image. So I'm kind of skipping through a lot of this stuff. The full recording was like 3 hours, I think. And obviously I'm cutting it way down for this video. But yeah, you're going to see like some of the things that didn't make it into the final thing here. Anyways, I'm adding a spotlight for the lighting. That did make it to the final render. and just kind of using this little cube here to have a reference for the scale of everything. I decided to duplicate this thing up. There's probably a better way to do that, but I just kind of was lazy with it and duplicated that entire thing up. I was still kind of figuring out at this stage exactly where I wanted this to go, so that's why I'm okay with trying more like rough ideas and not keeping everything super refined, because it's all very much subject to change. So yeah, if you see something that's just like a super obvious mistake, I'm probably just not worrying too much about it at this stage, where I know that the final scene is probably going to look way different. So really here what I'm trying to do is just get it to a point where I can commit to a direction and then go all out with that. And I'm trying not to worry about small details too much at this stage. So yeah, I'm just adding the volume, same volume setup I always use, just volume scatter on a cube over everything, and then lower the density. And yeah, again, just trying to get it kind of figured out, you know, like I'm not super sure at this stage where I want it to go. So I think around this point here, you're probably seeing what took me an hour to get to in like 5 minutes that I'm cutting down here. So, you know, like during the actual process, every single time I make a render, this happens where before you start and like in the beginning stages, there's always a feeling of uncertainty and like am I going to be able to finish this? Is this going to look good? Like, am I even ever going to be able to make a render? Sounds silly, but like that's literally how it feels. Is like damn, what if I can never make a good render again? That may sound ridiculous, but that is actually how it usually feels for me. And I'm definitely feeling that right here at this stage, where it's like nothing is going well. It looks like, in retrospect, it looks okay, but in the moment of making this, just super not happy with it at this stage at all. And that's when like the worry sets in, and then it's like if you're stressed about it, and then that just makes it even harder to make something good because you're just worrying about it being bad. So that was happening a lot here. So again, I'm skipping through a lot of this. The full recording again was 3 hours long, right? So you're seeing like a ultra speed run version here. I'm trying to show as much detail as I can so you can get a sense of how it was made, but in reality it was like a bunch of different directions that didn't work out, a bunch of like going down like random pathways that just led to nowhere, and then deleting stuff and then coming back, getting frustrated, worried the whole time. Like, you know, that's just part of the process, and it's part of the fun, to be honest. Like it makes it more satisfying in the end when you went through a journey to get there, you know. So it's not a bad thing at all. It's just part of the process. Anyways, back to what I'm actually doing on screen. This is the water setup from the last video I posted. So if you want to see the like full shading setup for this water, that's shown in the video, and you can like pause it at the end. There's also a tutorial just on the water only on my channel if you want to see that. But yeah, here I'm just trying to get the lighting kind of more dialed in. I really like this lighting setup where it's kind of very like godly or like holy sort of looking, like divine lighting, where I don't know, I'm just trying to get it to a point where it just feels right with the texture and the colors and the light and getting everything kind of balanced out. And really that's one of the most important things to me, is getting everything to just feel comfortable, pleasant, nice, balanced to look at, whether it's the colors, contrast, the amount of light coming in and how it bounces around. I'll spend a long time like trying to balance all of those different elements together in a way that feels like whatever vibe I'm trying to go for. So in this case, it's like trying to make it as serene and peaceful and maybe a little bit dark and creepy, but in like a peaceful, serene, beautiful way. That's the vibe I'm trying to go for, and I'll spend a long time usually just trying to dial that in as much as I can. And yeah, so I'm modeling a little archway here, just doing a little, start with a cylinder, delete half, extrude it down, add some bevels, and then that's a little arch there. And then you can even kind of, you know, go and add a little couple of trim pieces, and then I ended up actually duplicating this entire archway over onto itself. You'll see that in a second, like 5 times. And then that's a way to add like even more detail with that. So you know, my modeling strategy is often like just take one little chunk and then duplicate it as many times as possible. And that's usually a good way to like save time. So here's what I mean, like that little one is just a big one duplicated downwards, and then array modifier to get that into a line. And then you could just, you know, kind of refine it from there. So array, get a few of those on there without keyframing it, and then align it, apply the modifier, and then just kind of force that into place. I don't know if that's the best or most professional modeling strategy ever, but for a thing like this, like it works, you know. Okay, and then I'll get that on there, throw on a pillar that I made earlier at the beginning, and just kind of throw another one on, and then a little piece in the middle with a bevel to top it off, and then there you go, you got a little archway model. And that's something that you can really easily reuse in future projects, or even in the same project, as I will do in a second here. It's really nice to have stuff like that in the file that you can just duplicate around a bunch of times. So yeah, I'm trying out a bunch of different camera angles here and just trying to figure out like what's gonna be better, if I should capture it from the bottom looking up or the top looking down. So I did end up with an angle more like this right here, where it's like up above looking kind of downwards, which actually isn't something I do that often, but it looks really nice when you do it, I think, sometimes. And yeah, trying to balance everything with, like, again, still at this stage, I'm not exactly sure where it's going. I do have a better idea at this point right here of where it should go. And I think in a second here, or maybe in a minute or so, I'll really get an idea of what the final thing is going to look like. And I'll point that out when that happens here. But yeah, I ended up deleting a bunch of stuff there. That's actually a good trick that I do very often, is just go and add, try a bunch of things, add a bunch of stuff. A lot of it sucks, and then just go and delete the stuff that sucks. And maybe there's like a little piece that was good, and you just kind of keep doing that. And eventually, after doing that enough times, you'll have enough good stuff that you can just keep in there. But yeah, if you just try a bunch of, like, try adding a bunch of things, try a bunch of different ideas, work fast, don't refine things too much in the beginning so that you can keep trying out new ideas on the go, and, you know, trying stuff that may or may not work, and then, you know, delete the stuff that's bad. That's usually the way I like to go about it. And then it just lets me kind of try as many things as possible and, like, keep the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff, you know? And then, yeah, I'm just throwing in some statues, color matching that a bit with mix RGB. That's one thing I like to do a lot, is either use the hue saturation or mix RGB node to color match any models that I'm bringing in to the rest of the environment, so that it all feels cohesive and like it's kind of in the same space. So this is the point here where I got a much better idea of what I wanted it to look like. I think I took a really quick, like, 1 minute break and came back, and that's when I just kind of had this idea in my head, like, okay, I want to add a bunch of, like, rocks and these kind of Icelandic, this is not like a realistic version of it, kind of like a overly stylized hexagonal, like, I don't actually know what you call this, but like this cluster of hexagonal rocks everywhere. You'll see in a second when I actually make it, but that kind of layered with rocks, kind of layered with trees. So it's sort of almost natural looking, but not quite. But anyways, the point is, this stuff right here, this is at the point where it's like, okay, I know where I want this to go now, and I can kind of just focus and go all out with this direction here, as opposed to before where I was just trying a bunch of different things and it's like totally uncertain where it's going to end up, if I'm even going to finish it, if it's going to be good or not. Here is actually, I think, probably 2 hours in or something, I'm guessing, where it was like, okay, now I know what I want to do with this. And it took, you know, 2 hours of, like, uncertainty and not ending up with something I'm happy with, to get to the point where I'm like, okay, now I know what I want, and I can just go and do that. It's actually surprisingly easy to finish a render when you have a really clear goal, and as long as you're somewhat technically proficient, that's really the main thing. Is like having an idea that you're excited about, that you kind of know everything you need to do to get there. If you can just get through the beginning phase where everything is hard and it all sucks, and get to that point right there where it's like, oh, okay, now I know what I want this to look like, sort of. Once you get there, it's just all downhill from there, and it's super easy to just focus and just, like, you get to, I don't like to, like, overuse this term because it sounds kind of airy-fairy, but, like, you get into that flow state where stuff just starts happening. It's almost like not even you doing it. You're just kind of going and, like, doing actions, and stuff on the computer screen is just forming. If you can get to that point, that's where this becomes really fun. And it's just one of the most, like, nice experiences you can have, is just being in that state where you're just in the moment making stuff, and it's looking good and it's going the way you want. That just feels so nice and satisfying. And I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. I don't know if it'll always be in this form, but it's such a nice experience to have that it's like, yeah, it's just once you get there, it's just, that's why I love this, you know. Okay, so yeah, I'm adding geometry nodes, doing a scatter thing. I'm not going to talk about the technical specifics for that, but like, you know, there's a bunch of free videos on YouTube of like how to scatter things with geometry nodes or a particle system, or even literally just hand duplicate this 100 times if you want. You know, you can do it that way. It doesn't matter. Just get a cluster of this stuff and then start putting it around, and you'll get something similar. So yeah, I'm kind of just morphing it into place, and then it's, you know, with stuff like this, I never knew if this was right or not, where it's like stuff is just fully intersecting, going through the wall, going through the floor. There's a bunch of them that are in the scene, but you can't see them because they're actually behind the wall. I don't think that stuff matters at all. Like, it doesn't matter if it's everything's 100% perfect in the scene. Really, it's just about, at least for me in artwork like this, is just get it to look good in the render view, and whatever else, like however you get there, I don't care. I just want it to look good in the end, you know. And obviously with like a, you know, some game environment, you have to be more careful, or like you're giving it to a client that has to animate it from a different angle or something. Yeah, you can't just be totally reckless. But for a personal work, I would say, like, for me, I'll do whatever it takes to get there, and it doesn't matter to me if it looks bad from the outside, you know, or behind the camera. One thing I did there with those rocks, I'll just mention, is color match them as well. So just did a quick hue saturation adjustment. The rocks were brown and they almost were matching, but they're just slightly off. So I tweaked the hue, and then it just still looked a bit too saturated. So I brought the saturation down, and then now those rocks are like perfectly the same color as everything else. So it's a nice way to just kind of get everything to match and feel like it's all part of the same environment. I'm also picking trees here, which are kind of the same color, excuse me, as well, where it's like kind of just, you know, brown trees that they just feel right to be there, you know. If I picked a really green tree, it could work, and I did actually have some greener trees in here too, but it just seemed nice and right at this stage to keep everything kind of cohesive. And then obviously with the water, with like the blue water, that's kind of broken up a little bit and split into like complementary colors. But at this stage, it's like I wanted it to be easy to manage, and then not have too many conflicting colors going on, you know. Okay, so yeah, I'm tinting that blue, and I think it's a lot easier to get it to look good if it's, and this goes for like anything, it's a lot easier to get it to look good if it's easy to manage. So that's why there's only one light in the scene right now. I think two lights. There's a spotlight and like a really subtle area light. That's why there was only one color up to this point, and then I'll bring in a second color here, because in order to balance all these different elements, you have to have control over each one. And as soon as you have like 10 different lights or 10 different colors, or, you know, too many different ideas coming together, you can't manage each one of those on their own. So I think there's a lot of advantage to simplicity, and like just keeping things as simple as they possibly can be for as long as you can, getting the balance right, and then only after you've like gotten that to where you want it, then start adding in more complexity. But you have to take it step by step. If you just try and make it complex from the beginning, it's often like you just get overloaded and you can't even deal with it, and then you just give up. So that's kind of how I approach. That's why it's like, you know, after 2 hours I added a second color, you know. So after 2 hours there's still one main light in the scene, and the other one's like basically doing almost nothing, where it's just like bringing up the shadows slightly, an area light directly above everything. But the main light is still that one spotlight, you know. So yeah, that's how I like to work, and just I think that it applies to so many things, not even just within Blender, but like within a lot of things in life too. So yeah, I'm bringing in some more trees here. Now I'm kind of bringing in a bit more colors, where it's like, it's still kind of just like a brown tree, but it's a little more green, you know. And I'm still being careful to like not have conflicting colors and stuff. So here's what I'm doing at this point for the lighting. I'm happy with the general direction and shape and softness and everything, but I'm gonna cover up the entire scene with this plane right here. So like fully shadowed out by this plane. And then I'm dropping on a texture. So this is a technique called a lighting gobo. You might have heard of this before. So you can either use like a noise texture, an image texture, just throw objects in front of this light, anything you want. So here's the plane, you can see that. So I'm just running this into the alpha so that some parts are transparent. And anything you want in order to cast kind of interesting shadows onto the scene like this. And I particularly like this technique where the lighting is, you're happy with it, but it's kind of boring, where it's not really giving you the, it's maybe like just overhead like this, or just needs to be more interesting, but you don't want to change the angle. This is a great technique where you can like this here just looks so much more interesting than I did before. And even if you don't make it this extreme with like super bright highlights and super dark shadows, you just a little bit of that, just it makes it feel just nice in some ways, where it's like it's kind of the same vibe as if you're sitting under a tree and like the sun is shining through the leaves and you're getting some spots of sun and some spots of shade. It just creates a really nice, pleasant feeling of like peace. And if you can have that on your, in your render, it really does enhance that feeling of like the kind of serene vibe, the peacefulness, it just makes the lighting more interesting overall. It's just nice and feels kind of like nice to look at, So it's that technique I really like. It's just throw in some interesting shadows, whether you want to do that with throwing a tree in front of the light, manually adding objects in front of the light to cast shadows, or like I'm doing here, like a random image of some water that's casting some shadows on the whole scene. It doesn't matter how you do it, just get some interesting shadows and there will really help. Okay, so here I've duplicated that platform thing to the other side. Didn't end up keeping that, but you can see what I'm doing here. That led to me kind of putting this staircase on top of that. And then this was kind of like the more final look of having stairs in here. Stairs and like railings are really nice for showing scale. If you don't want to put a person directly in there, but you still want to show scale. Putting like, a very recognizable object like a staircase, railings, birds, windows, a chair, furniture, stuff like that is, that's a great way to show scale, because it just gives you a reference point for, anyone looking at the artwork. It subconsciously tells you exactly how big everything else is, because you automatically know how big, stairs are. And yes, they can vary in size, but it at least gives you a pretty generally accurate idea of how big everything else is. Because otherwise it's like, how else would you know how big this thing is? You have to have some sort of reference point, and you want it to be obvious too, so that when you first see it, within an instant, somebody can tell kind of what they're looking at. Yeah. So here I'm just kind of moving the lighting around, and you can see that just by spinning it around the scene, that can really alter the mood of the picture. So you could, I don't think like any one of those is better than the other. It's just depending on the look you want to go for. But yeah, just interesting how that really shifts the mood if you just move the light around a little bit, So there I'm duplicating that inner ring thing, and I like having kind of steps within the water like this to show different levels of depth. That's really a nice sort of effect. It just looks nice having like different steps going deeper into the water. I don't know why, it just kind of makes it look like you'd want to go and sit there or something, or kind of like, go into the water. It just looks really nice. And then I'm kind of going and tinting that thing a bit more blue. Here I just duplicated the entire water cube thing above itself, and this is actually a really interesting look where doubling it up like this looked crazy, because if you don't know, the transparent material there is actually set to a brightness above 1, so anything that passes through the water is actually becoming like 2 or 3 times brighter than before. It's like getting multiplied higher, and if you stack up multiple of those water surfaces on top of each other, it's like getting doubly multiplied. So it's kind of a really crazy look that I might do in a future render. In this one I didn't stick with that, but I really did like that at the time actually. And then one thing I did here which really made a big difference was turning up the number of volume bounces. That really helped make the water just look really nice. I forgot to mention that in the other water tutorial I did, but that's what I ended up with there. Turn on reflective and refractive caustics too, just because why not. Okay, so with this thing here, this is a random free face model from CG Trader. And you can see that there's right now no shadows on it, and you can't even make out any of the features of the face. So one thing I had to do was angle the lighting and angle the face a bit differently. And by the way, I just want to mention too, if you just go on CG Trader, search face, You can actually just find a bunch of these for free. So if you're wondering where I got that, it's literally just a random free model. So anyways, what you're going to see me do here is kind of just delete excess crap that's in the scene that's just, you can't even see. It's not doing anything. It doesn't cast any shadows. It's just in the way. That lets me take this light here and then position it at a bit more of an extreme angle and just watch the shadows on the face and look at how much more of the defining features you can see once I angle the light a little bit more of at like an extreme angle here. Okay, so you see that? So whereas before you couldn't even tell that it was a face, it just looked like a blob. Now, as soon as I rotate the light to cast a little bit more extreme shadows from the face, and I angle the face a little bit more away from the light as well by just rotating it, then you can actually tell what's happening because the shadows reveal the form. Okay, so I'm duplicating that out, and I'm gonna make some modifications to the second one without affecting the first one, and then once I'm happy with that, I'll just link the first one back to the second one. I'm doing that just because I was happy with the rotation of the first one. I just didn't want to fuck that up, so just kind of doing it on a separate thing, and then I can just link the first one to the second one when I'm ready. And also it's nice to kind of do it in a separate copy in case I really do mess this up. I can just have my backup off to the side there. So I'm adding a plane, subdividing it, like doing an inset, deleting those faces to like create a grid like this. And then this just looks really fucked up in the viewport. Anytime you're working with a face, it just looks horrendous and scary. Just try not to focus on that. Just look at the actual technique. So that's going to be my Boolean cutter. So just, I had screencast keys off here, but it's you select one, select the other object, shift minus on the numpad. And then I just switched the Boolean operation method to fast. And you can see it's very janky here, but I was able to just get it in the right spot where it was kind of doing mostly what I wanted. And then just applied that modifier and then deleted the cutter object, and I'm left with this here as a mesh now. And this is, again, quite janky, but enough to work with. So first thing I'm doing is kind of just fixing that missing piece. And this took a decent amount of cleanup. The geometry was like quite messy on this and didn't look good straight away. But after cleaning it up and like deleting a bunch of excess nonsense that was just in the way, you can see like the whole backside, deleting that, all these vertices here, deleting that, any weird like tongue or anything on this face here that's like the other person modeled that I just don't want to deal with here, deleting all that, delete until it's just kind of like one surface. And then that lets me kind of do what I want a bit more from here. So it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be close enough to what I want. I can just take that whole thing, extrude it all straight down, and then I can link the first one. Just select one object, shift select the second one, hit Control L, link object data from that one to the other one. Then I can go in and actually get what I want. So there we go. Now we have that kind of like grid thing on this one. I actually don't know where this came from. I think I saw one artwork. I'll try and link it below, but I don't even remember who it was that did this first. But I saw this in one other artwork with like a statue that had a bunch of squares in it like this, making up a face. I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to do something similar here. And you can see too that it's not like this. It's shaded smooth, but it's like really bad, like glitched shading. So, but like in the viewport it looks bad. Like in the solid view, just looks like, ooh, that is problematic. In the render though, doesn't look too bad. It looks better shaded smooth with like the glitched shading than it did on shaded flat or like shade auto smooth. So I just kind of went with that, and then I'm just kind of deleting, parts I didn't like here. It was more interesting to have, certain sections missing. Makes it feel older and abandoned, and like kind of helps tell a story of like, something happened here. So yeah, anyways, what I did here to kind of fix this problem of just this horrible shading was just kind of leave it. I left it on shade smooth, and then just kind of added some loop cuts where it was really problematic, and just kind of went and did some little insets and stuff, and kind of manually fixed any really badly problematic areas. But overall, in the render, it doesn't even look that bad. So I kind of just left it for the most part. And sometimes that's the best way to fix a problem that's like, oh no, my viewport shading is all terrible and I don't know how to fix it. But if you look at the render, it's actually fine. So it's like, do I want to spend that much time like going in and like doing all this modeling to fix a problem that isn't actually really a problem? Sometimes the solution is literally just like not worry about it at all. Like how I UV unwrap literally everything with Cube Project. Yeah, anyways, I'm just finishing this one up here with just, you know, a couple extra pieces of geometry. I think I rendered this at 4000 by 5000, 100%, just that resolution there. But I've been rendering at a little bit higher resolutions because it's just nice to have. And then, yeah, you know, I think it was like 300 samples, something like that. And then, yeah, just finishing it up with some Photoshop, lighting adjustments, a little bit of like color adjustments, but mostly just like fix the lighting a little bit with like some exposure adjustments, add some clarity, sharpening, and then add some saturation, and like doesn't need much more than that, you know. Sometimes less is more, and if you just don't go too extreme with the post-processing, that'll be a much better result than if you know, overly add too much contrast and overly crank the saturation way too high. Sometimes less is more, and you can just leave it like not too edited, you know. By the way, check out the new Cyber Environments course that just came out recently, and people have been making like really crazy cyberpunk renders from that, so I'm super happy with that. If you're interested in my newest course to learn exactly everything that I know about making these types of renders, I would highly recommend that. So yeah, link below. Comes with a bunch of asset packs too. You get to join the Discord with like 800 other environment artists that are all, everyone in there is super chill. Everyone's giving feedback, sharing the renders, posting interesting stuff about Blender. Like, it's a really nice community. You can ask me questions directly, talk to me, whatever. And it's a full course built around making crazy renders. So go and check that out if you're interested. If you made it this far in the video, you will probably like that. So I'd actually highly recommend that for you specifically. Yes, you watching this video right now. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. See ya.